Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku joined the League of Villains and rose to power. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The city air was thick with the reek of burnt sugar and scorched asphalt. It was a smell Izuku Midoriya had come to associate with excitement, a Pavlovian trigger for the frantic scribbling in his worn-out notebook. Today, however, it was just cloying and suffocating. A massive crowd had formed a human dam at the mouth of the narrow commercial street, their phones held aloft like a forest of tiny, glowing periscopes, all pointed towards the chaos. Izuku, small for his 14 years, weaved his way through the blockade of bodies with practiced ease. He was a connoisseur of such disasters, a student of the heroic. He had to see. He had to analyze. When he finally broke through to the front line, the scene was worse than he'd imagined. A monstrous creature made of viscous green sludge was writhing in the middle of the street, its formless body engulfing the fire hydrants and streetlights it had torn from their foundations. The explosions that had drawn the crowd were still erupting intermittently, small, controlled blasts that rippled from the epicenter of the sludge. The pros were already here. Death Arms stood with his muscular arms crossed, his face a mask of grim frustration. His quirk, super strength, was useless against a fluid opponent. He was a hammer trying to fight a flood. Kamui Woods was evacuating civilians, his wooden limbs extending to pluck people from second-story windows, but he kept a wary distance from the villain. The fire was a constant threat to his arboreal body. Backdraft and the rookie hero Empty Lady were handling crowd control, their expressions tight with a mixture of focus and inadequacy. They're not doing anything, Izuku thought, his pen hovering over a fresh page in his hero analysis for the future number 13. His mind was already racing, cataloging the variables, the weaknesses, the potential strategies. The villain is fluid and seems to have an explosive element. They're holding a hostage. That must be the source of the explosions. A student by the looks of the uniform. His blood ran cold. The uniform was familiar. Black with a high collar. The spiky, ash-blonde hair, visible for a brief, horrifying second as the victim struggled, was unmistakable. Kaken. The world tilted on its axis. The analytical part of his brain, the part that saw heroes and villains as complex equations to be solved, sputtered and died. All that remained was a raw, primal terror that clawed its way up his throat. That wasn't just a hostage, it was Katsuki Bakugo. The boy who had tormented him, mocked him, and nicknamed him Deku. The boy who, despite everything, was still the very picture of victory, a future number 1 hero in the making. And he was suffocating. His eyes, usually so full of arrogant fire, were wide with panic, pleading for a rescue that wasn't coming. Why aren't the heroes helping him? Someone in the crowd muttered. They can't get close. Another replied. That thing is a nightmare. None of them have the right quirk. They were right. Izuku could see it. He could see the strategic paralysis that had gripped them. They were waiting for someone with a more suitable power, a specialist. But Kaken didn't have time for them to wait. His struggles were becoming weaker, the explosions less frequent. Izuku's legs moved before his brain could issue a command. He didn't know why. It was a stupid, suicidal impulse. He was quirkless. A pebble in the face of a landslide. But he remembered his notes, a frantic scribble from weeks ago about Sand Hero, Snatch. Weakness. Fluid villains can be disrupted by solid impacts to a concentrated area, especially the eyes if they are a solid-state weak point. He didn't have sand. He had a bright yellow backpack full of textbooks. He burst past the police line, a blur of green and white. He heard the heroes shout his name, a mix of shock and fury. Hey! Kid! Stop! The world narrowed to a single, desperate corridor. At the end of it was the sludge villain, its 2 large, cartoonish eyes swiveling to focus on the new, insignificant threat. Izuku unslung his backpack, swinging it with all his might. The heavy bag sailed through the air and struck the villain squarely in its right eye with a wet, satisfying thwack. The monster roared, its grip on Bakugo loosening for a fraction of a second. It was enough. Bakugo gasped, pulling in a ragged, desperate breath of air. Deku? He choked out, his voice a mixture of disbelief and incandescent rage. "What the hell are you doing?" "I don't know," Izuku screamed back, his fingers clawing uselessly at the sludge, trying to find purchase, trying to pull his childhood friend free. "My legs they just started moving. You looked like you were asking for help." That was the wrong thing to say. Bakugo's face contorted in a snarl of pure humiliation. The idea that he, Katsuki Bakugo, would ever need help from a worthless, quirkless Deku was a greater insult than the villain currently trying to digest him. The sludge villain recovered, its massive form surging forward to engulf Izuku as well. This was it. This was how he died. A pathetic, quirkless nobody who got himself killed trying to play hero. He closed his eyes, bracing for the end. "I really am pathetic." The voice was a thunderclap that shook the very foundations of the street. "Even though I admonished you, I wasn't putting what I said into practice." Izuku's eyes snapped open. A mountainous figure stood between him and the villain, one fist cocked back. The two tufts of hair, like rabbit ears against the sky. The impossible, shadow-casting smile. "All Might. Pros are always risking their lives," he bellowed, his voice a force of nature. Detroit. Smash! A hurricane of pure force erupted from his fist. The air pressure alone was enough to blast the sludge villain into 1,000 tiny droplets, scattering it across the block. The sky, which had been clear moments before, suddenly clouded over. It started to rain. All Might had changed the weather with a single punch. Izuku lay on the asphalt, trembling, as paramedics and heroes swarmed the scene. He was fine, physically. But as the adrenaline faded, a cold dread began to seep into its place. He hadn't saved anyone. He had just gotten in the way. He was a distraction, a liability. All Might had saved them both. The scolding came swiftly. Death arms loomed over him, his face etched with disapproval. "There's risking your life, and then there's suicide, kid. You accomplished nothing. You just made our job harder." Kamui Woods nodded, his wooden features severe. "If he hadn't been distracted by you, we might have had a chance to contain him. You put the hostage in even more danger. Never do something so foolish again." The words were like stones, each one striking a fresh bruise on his already fractured spirit. They praised Bakugo for his fierce resistance and his powerful quirk, while Izuku, who had created the opening that allowed Bakugo to breathe, was treated like a criminal. He stood there, dripping with rain and villain sludge, and felt the eyes of the crowd on him. They weren't looks of admiration. They were looks of pity, of second-hand embarrassment. He was the quirkless kid who didn't know his place. He saw All Might giving a final interview to the press before leaping away, a gust of wind his only farewell. Izuku had a question. A single, desperate question that had been burning inside him his entire life. A question only the number one hero could answer. Without thinking, he ran. Clinging to the leg of a man moving at several hundred miles per hour was, Izuku decided, the second most terrifying experience of his life. The wind tore at his face, threatening to rip him from his hold. All Might only noticed him when they landed with a bone-jarring thud on the roof of a tall, anonymous office building. "Hey now! What do you think you're doing?" All Might boomed, his smile looking strained for the first time. "That was incredibly dangerous. I love my fans, but that's too much. I had to ask you something." Izuku gasped, his body shaking uncontrollably. "No! I will not be answering any questions." "Now I must." All Might froze, his body seizing. A cloud of steam suddenly erupted from him, thick and white like a smokescreen. When it cleared, the symbol of peace was gone. In his place stood a skeletal man, swimming in his own clothes. His eyes were sunken into dark, cavernous sockets, and when he coughed, blood spattered from his thin lips onto the back of his hand. Izuku stared, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. This gaunt, broken creature couldn't be All Might. It was impossible. The man sighed, a rattling sound deep in his chest. "You see this, don't you, kid? Ugly, huh?" He sat down heavily on the rooftop, lifting his shirt to reveal a horrific, swirling scar that dominated the left side of his torso. It looked like a starburst of ruined flesh, a permanent testament to some cataclysmic injury. "This is what a real fight with a real villain looks like," the man, This shadow of All Might said softly. 5 years ago. It took out my stomach and one of my lungs. I've been wasting away ever since. The reason I can only do hero work for about 3 hours a day? The reason I'm always smiling? It's to hide the fear. To convince the world, and maybe myself, that the symbol of peace is still here. Izuku's dream was crumbling into dust. The invincible hero, the pillar of their society, was a fragile man running on fumes. The realization was a cold, heavy weight in his gut. But his question remained. It was the foundation of his entire existence, and he had to know the answer. He squeezed his eyes shut, bowing his head. Even if I don't have a quirk, he began, his voice trembling, can I still be a hero? Can someone without a quirk ever hope to be someone like you? He looked up, his eyes filled with a desperate, pleading light. It was a prayer whispered in the presence of a dying god. All Might's expression softened for a moment, a flicker of pity in his hollow eyes. But then it hardened into a grim, pragmatic resolve. He had to be realistic. He had to be responsible. No, he said. The word was quiet, but it hit Izuku with the force of a physical blow. It's good to have dreams, young man. But you have to be realistic. The hero profession is a dangerous one. We're constantly putting our lives on the line. I can't simply say, yes, you can be a hero even without power. He stood up, his tall frame casting a long, skeletal shadow over the boy. Look at what happened today. Your heart was in the right place, but you were powerless. You would have died if I hadn't shown up. You would have been a liability. Villains are not comic book characters. They are ruthless and unforgiving. Without a quirk, you would be a target, a weakness for other heroes to protect. You would get in the way. You would get yourself, and potentially others, killed. Each word was a careful, precise incision, expertly severing the last threads of hope that held Izuku together. So no. I don't think you can be a hero without a quirk. All Might turned towards the door leading into the building. If you want to help people, there are other ways. You could become a police officer. They get a bad rap because they're often cleaning up after heroes, but it's a fine and respectable profession. He didn't look back. He didn't see the light go out in Izuku's eyes. He didn't see the boy's shoulders slump, defeated. He opened the door and disappeared down the stairwell, leaving Izuku utterly alone on the rooftop, the cold wind whipping around him, a silent scream trapped in his throat. The world had gone silent. The bustling city below, a place that had always seemed so full of promise and adventure, now looked like a vast, uncaring machine of steel and glass. All Might's words echoed in the emptiness of his mind. No, be realistic. A liability. The dream was dead. It had been pronounced dead by the one person who had given it life. The walk home was a blur. Izuku moved on autopilot, his feet scuffing against the pavement, his gaze fixed on nothing. The world was muted, the colors leached out. His mind was a maelstrom of failure and humiliation. The hero's scorn. All Might's verdict. The pitying looks of the crowd. It all churned within him, a toxic brew of despair. He was just turning onto his own street when a familiar, grating voice cut through his stupor. Deku. Izuku froze. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Katsuki Bakugo stood there, his hands jammed in his pockets, a thunderous scowl on his face. He wasn't alone. 2 of his sycophantic middle school classmates flanked him, their smirks oozing with second-hand arrogance. I didn't ask for your help, Bakugo snarled, taking a step forward. The smell of nitroglycerin, like burnt caramel, hung in the air around him. I didn't need it. I had it handled. You didn't save me. You just got in the way. Izuku said nothing. He just stared at the ground, at a crack in the sidewalk that seemed more interesting than anything else in the world. His silence seemed to infuriate Bakugo more than any argument would have. Are you deaf? I'm talking to you, you worthless piece of trash. You made me look weak. You, a quirkless, useless nobody, made me look like I needed saving. He shoved Izuku hard in the shoulder, sending him stumbling back. The other 2 boys snickered. You think you're some kind of hero? Bakugo's voice dropped to a low, venomous hiss. His red eyes were burning with a hatred so pure, it was almost beautiful. You're nothing. A pebble on the side of the road. A worthless Deku who doesn't know when to give up. He leaned in close, his voice a cruel whisper meant to shatter whatever was left of Izuku's spirit. The words he had spoken that morning, the ones Izuku had tried so hard to dismiss, came back with renewed, vicious force, now sharpened by the day's events. You know, if you really want to be a hero so bad, there might actually be a way, Bakugo sneered, a wicked grin spreading across his face. The other boys leaned in, eager for the punchline. Take a swan dive off the roof of a tall building and pray you'll be born with a quirk in your next life. The laughter that followed was sharp and cruel. It echoed in the quiet suburban street, a sound of pure, unadulterated malice. For a moment, Bakugo seemed to expect a reaction, a flinch, tears, a stuttered protest. He got nothing. Izuku just stood there, his green eyes utterly blank. The words washed over him, but he felt nothing. There was nothing left to hurt. He was a hollow shell, the contents scoured out by the day's relentless tide. This final cruelty was just one more drop of rain on a boy who had already drowned. His lack of reaction was unsettling. Bakugo's grin faltered. He stared at Izuku for a second longer, searching for the familiar fear, the pathetic tears he was so used to provoking. Seeing only an unnerving emptiness, he scoffed, turning on his heel. "Tch, whatever. Just stay out of my way from now on, you got it?" He barked over his shoulder, and then he and his cronies were gone, their laughter fading down the street. Izuku didn't go home. He couldn't. He couldn't face his mother's worried expression. He couldn't bear to hear her apologize for his quirklessness, as if it were a defect she was responsible for. He couldn't sit in his room, surrounded by the suffocating iconography of the hero who had personally executed his dream. He wandered. His feet took him to a forgotten part of town, a labyrinth of narrow, garbage-strewn alleys between dilapidated buildings. He found a particularly grimy one, secluded and dark, and slid down the brick wall until he was sitting on the cold, damp concrete. He was finally alone. Here, in the dark, the dam broke. But there was no storm, no flood of tears. Just a quiet, steady leak. A single tear traced a path through the grime on his cheek, then another. He pulled his knees to his chest, his body racked with silent, shuddering sobs. His hand fumbled for his backpack. He pulled out his notebook, the one labeled Hero Analysis for the Future. It fell open to the latest page, the one about the sludge villain. His own handwriting mocked him, a testament to a foolish, impossible dream. He saw the detailed drawing of All Might on the cover, the signature he had been so proud of now feeling like a brand of failure. A strangled cry of pure anguish tore from his throat. He grabbed the cover and ripped. The sound of tearing paper was loud in the silent alley. He tore out the page on All Might, then the one on Kamui Woods, then another and another. He shredded his life's work, his passion, his very identity, with a frantic, desperate energy. The torn pages, filled with his meticulous notes and drawings, fluttered around him like dead leaves. He was nothing. A quirkless failure. A joke. A liability. A Deku. He sat amidst the ruins of his dream, his breathing ragged, his eyes hollow. The world had no place for him. Hero society, the thing he had worshipped his entire life, had examined him, found him wanting, and discarded him in this alley like a piece of trash. There was a sound, a soft, swirling noise, like silk being dragged through smoke. Izuku looked up, his tear-filled eyes struggling to focus. A few feet in front of him, the air itself was twisting. A dark, purple-black mist coalesced out of nowhere, forming a swirling, amorphous gate. It was silent, unnatural, and deeply unsettling. From the heart of the mist, two glowing yellow lights appeared, like the eyes of a predator in the night. A figure began to resolve from the swirling darkness. It was a man, or at least the shape of a man, composed entirely of the same dark mist, save for the crisp, clean bartender's uniform he wore and the polished metal brace around his neck. Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs. A villain. This had to be a villain. He scrambled backward, pressing himself against the brick wall, his mind screaming at him to run, to scream, to do something. But his body was frozen, paralyzed by a cocktail of fear and utter emotional exhaustion. He had nothing left. The mist man took a silent step forward, his movements unnaturally smooth. He exuded an aura of calm, unnerving politeness that was somehow more terrifying than any overt threat. Izuku Midoriya, I presume? The creature asked. His voice was deep and cultured, each word spoken with a precise, almost soothing articulation. Hearing his own name spoken by this thing sent a fresh jolt of terror through Izuku. They knew who he was. They had been looking for him. Who are you? Izuku stammered, his voice barely a whisper. My name is Kurogiri, the villain said with a slight, formal bow of his misty head. I am here on behalf of my master. He and we saw what you did today. Izuku flinched, expecting more scorn, more ridicule. We were not watching the heroes, Kurogiri continued, his yellow eyes fixed on Izuku. We were watching you. We did not see a reckless child, Izuku Midoriya. We saw the only person on that street who correctly analyzed the situation. The only one who understood the hero's limitations. The only one with the courage to act when those paid to do so stood by and did nothing. Izuku stared, bewildered. Praise? He was praising him? It was the exact opposite of what the heroes had told him. They have quirks. They have power, Kurogiri said, his voice a low, persuasive hum. But they are blind. They stood by and watched a boy suffocate, and then they had the audacity to scold the one person who tried to save him. Does that seem like justice to you? Does that seem heroic? The question hung in the air, a venomous, seductive thing. Izuku thought of Death Arms' angry face, of All Might's cold, pragmatic dismissal. No. It didn't seem heroic. It seemed broken. It seemed wrong. Our master, Kurogiri went on, taking another slow step closer, he values talent above all else. Not quirks. Not brute strength. He values intellect. Strategic thinking. The will to act. He believes a person's worth is not determined by the accident of their birth, but by the strength of their mind and the conviction in their heart. He gestured towards the torn pages of Izuku's notebook scattered on the ground. He sees your potential, Izuku Midoriya. He sees what this flawed, hypocritical society is too blind to see. He sees a diamond they have thrown away with the trash. Kurogiri extended a misty hand, not in aggression, but as an invitation. The purple warp gate behind him swirled gently, a silent promise of something else. We are not here to harm you. We are not here to force you. We are simply here to offer a conversation. A chance to be heard by someone who will actually listen. A place where your unique perspective would not only be welcome, but celebrated. Izuku looked from the offered hand to the swirling portal. His mind was a battlefield. Everything he had ever believed, everything he had ever been taught, screamed that this was wrong. This was the path of a villain. But what other path was there? The path of the hero was a locked, iron gate, and All Might himself had slammed it in his face. The path of a normal life was a gauntlet of mockery and pity, lorded over by the likes of Kaken. He looked down at his trembling hands. The hands of a quirkless, useless Deku. Kurogiri's words echoed in his mind. He sees your potential. It was the one thing he had longed to hear his entire life. And it had come not from a hero, but from the shadows. He looked at the pieces of his shredded dream on the filthy alley floor. He thought of All Might's skeletal form and his dead-end words. He thought of Bakugo's jeering face, telling him to take a swan dive. Maybe he would dive into a world that didn't care about quirks. A world that valued his mind. A world where he wouldn't be useless. Slowly, shakily, Izuku Midoriya got to his feet. He ignored Kurogiri's outstretched hand and took a deliberate step towards the purple mist. He didn't look back at the life he was leaving behind. There was nothing there for him. The light of his old world had been extinguished, leaving only the cold, inviting glow of the nightmare ahead. He took one final step, crossing the threshold from the grimy alley into the swirling, silent darkness of the warp gate. The nightmare had begun. The transition was not violent. There was no gut-wrenching lurch or sensation of speed. It was a cold, silent plunge into nothingness. For a moment that stretched into an eternity, Izuku Midoriya was adrift in a sensory deprivation tank of purple-black mist. The sounds of the city, the smell of rain-dampened asphalt, the chilling breeze on his skin, all of it was gone, stripped away as if it had never existed. He was a ghost in an empty dimension, the only proof of his existence the frantic, terrified drumming of his own heart. Then, just as abruptly as it began, it was over. His feet found solid ground. The oppressive silence was replaced by the low hum of a faulty refrigerator and the faint, melancholic drip of a leaky faucet. The air was stale, thick with the ghosts of spilled liquor, undusted shelves, and cheap cigarette smoke. He blinked, his eyes adjusting to the dim, jaundiced light cast by a single shaded bulb hanging over a long, wooden bar. He was in a dive bar. It was a place of quiet desperation, the kind of establishment that existed in the forgotten corners of every city. The bar top was scarred with rings from countless glasses, the leather on the stools was cracked and peeling, and a row of dusty, unlabeled bottles stood like silent sentinels on the shelves behind it. The only clean thing in the room was Kurohige, who stood behind the bar, methodically polishing a glass with a white cloth, his misty form somehow immune to the surrounding grime. At the far end of the bar, hunched over on a stool, was another figure. He was thin and wiry, dressed in a plain black long-sleeved shirt and dark pants. His face was obscured by a disembodied hand, its pale, desiccated fingers gripping him like a macabre mask. The hair that escaped from behind it was a pale, chalky blue, and he was scratching at his neck with a furious, agitated energy, the sound of nails on dry skin a disturbing counterpoint to the dripping tap. This, Izuku realized with a fresh spike of adrenaline, was the League of Villains. Not a high-tech fortress or a demonic throne room. Just a forgotten bar and two strange, unnerving men. The man with the hand on his face stopped scratching and slowly turned his head. A single, wild red eye peered out from between the fingers, fixing on Izuku with an unnerving intensity. It was an eye filled with a potent, childish malice. Kurohige, the man rasped, his voice dry and cracked, like sandpaper. What is this? I thought you were scouting for new players. This looks like a starter's own NPC. He doesn't even have a decent loot drop. Kurohige placed the polished glass down with a soft click. This is Izuku Midoriya, Tamura Shigaraki. Sensei wished for me to bring him here. The name Sensei seemed to momentarily placate the man, Shigaraki, but his hostile gaze didn't leave Izuku. He slid off the stool and shuffled closer, his movements jerky and unnatural. He circled Izuku like a predator sizing up a weak, pathetic animal. This is who Sensei is interested in. Shigaraki sneered, the sound muffled by the hand. He's quirkless. I can smell it on him. The reek of uselessness. Why is he here? Is he a party buff? A healer? No, he's just baggage. Another annoying tutorial quest I have to sit through. Izuku stood frozen, his back ramrod straight. Fear was a cold, hard knot in his stomach, but something else was beginning to surface alongside it, observation. His analytical mind, the very thing that had defined him his entire life, was kicking back into gear as a defense mechanism. He was cataloging details. Shigaraki, Tamura? Apparent leader. Unstable. Obsessed with video game terminology. Quirk unknown, but his five-fingered scratching habit and the hand on his face suggest it might be touch-based. He is openly disrespectful, implying a familiar, perhaps familial, relationship with this sensei. Sensei's judgment is not to be questioned, Tamura Shigaraki, Kurohige said, his tone placid but firm. He sees value where others do not. Value? Shigaraki let out a harsh, grating laugh. What value is there in a broken toy? The whole point is to smash the things that are built up, the things that are strong. Smashing something that's already broken is no fun. It's boring. He stopped in front of Izuku, leaning in close. The red eye was manic. So tell me, NPC. What's your purpose here? Did you get lost on your way to the trash heap? Izuku's mouth was dry. He opened it, but no words came out. What could he say? I'm here because my idol told me I was worthless and the one person who tormented me my entire life told me to kill myself. He was broken. Shigaraki was right. Before the silence could stretch into a fatal weakness, a new sound filled the bar. It was the crackle of static, followed by the electronic hum of a television powering on. Mounted on the wall behind the bar, an old, boxy CRT television flickered to life. The screen was a blizzard of black and white static, but from it, a voice emerged. It was a voice that commanded absolute attention, calm and deep, yet impossibly heavy, like the pressure of the deep ocean. It was distorted by the cheap speaker, but the power behind it was unmistakable. Tamura. That is enough. Shigaraki instantly recoiled as if struck. He straightened up, his whole demeanor shifting from petulant predator to chastised child. He took a step back from Izuku, stuffing his hands in his pockets and turning to face the screen. Sensei, he mumbled, his earlier aggression gone, replaced by a sullen deference. Leave us, the voice commanded. Kurojiri, you may remain. Shigaraki shot one last, venomous glare at Izuku before shuffling towards a door at the back of the room, slamming it shut behind him. The sound echoed in the tense silence. The static on the screen swirled, and for a moment, the words audio only appeared in stark white letters before vanishing back into the digital snow. Izuku Midoriya, the voice from the television said. It spoke his name not as a question or an accusation, but as a simple statement of fact. I am sorry for my students' lack of decorum. Tamura is a work in progress. He has a great deal of destructive potential, but he is a blunt instrument. He has yet to appreciate the profound power of a sharper, more subtle tool. Izuku stared at the screen, mesmerized. This was the master. The sensei. This was the devil himself, speaking through a wire. I have been watching you for some time, young man, the voice continued, a warm, almost fatherly tone seeping into its electronic rasp. Long before your encounter with the sludge villain today, I've observed your meticulous note-taking, your relentless pursuit of knowledge. Your mind, Izuku Midoriya, is a rare and precious thing in a world that only values brute force. Izuku's breath hitched. He wasn't being mocked. He was being complimented. Today, the voice went on, you proved my assessment correct. In a street full of so-called pro-heroes, individuals with government licenses and decades of experience, you were the only one who saw the path to victory. You saw the villain's weakness. You saw the hostage's desperation. You saw the hero's paralysis. And you acted. That backpack you threw was not a reckless act of a child. It was a calculated strike, a brilliant piece of improvisation born from a deep understanding of tactical application. Is that not so? Izuku couldn't speak, but he gave a short, jerky nod. The voice seemed to understand. And what was your reward for this display of intellect and courage? Scorn. Ridicule. You were labeled a liability by the very people you sought to help. And then, you had your audience with the symbol of peace himself. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Izuku felt a cold dread creep up his spine. How could he know that? Oh, yes. I know all about it, the voice said, as if reading his thoughts. The rooftop conversation. The shattering of a lifelong dream. He told you to be realistic, did he not? He told you that you could not be a hero. He looked at your spirit, your intelligence, your heart, and he saw nothing, because he is pathologically incapable of seeing value beyond a quirk. The voice paused, letting the words sink in, letting them reopen the fresh wounds in Izuku's soul. He could feel the phantom wind of that rooftop, hear All Might's pronouncement of his failure echoing in his ears. Do you know why he said that, Izuku? It is not because he wishes to protect you. It is because he is the pillar of a system that is fundamentally broken, a system built on a lie. And you, a quirkless boy with the heart of a true hero, are a threat to that lie. Izuku's mind reeled. A threat? Him? How? Allow me to illuminate you, the voice said, its tone shifting from comforting to that of a learned professor delivering a lecture. What is Heroes Society? It is a carefully constructed fantasy, a multi-trillion yen industry built on the commercialization of public safety. It is not about saving people. It is about performance. It is about approval ratings, merchandise sales, and lucrative television deals for primetime patrols. Heroes are not saviors, they are celebrities. Their rankings are not based on lives saved, but on popularity polls and the number of incidents resolved in a flashy, camera-friendly manner. They fight for the spotlight as much as they fight for justice. All Might is not the symbol of peace. He is the world's most successful brand. The words were blasphemy. They were a direct assault on the core of Izuku's entire belief system. And yet, he couldn't deny the kernel of truth within them. He thought of the hero merchandise that filled his room. The pre-fight banter he'd seen on TV. The way Empty Lady had debuted by stealing the limelight from another hero. Consider the hypocrisy, the voice pressed on, its logic relentless and seductive. They preach that every life is precious, yet as you witness today, they will stand by and watch a child suffocate if they do not possess the correct quirk for the situation. They condemn vigilantism, yet they cause billions in property damage every year, collateral damage that is written off as a necessary expense for their heroic activities. It is a system that rewards flashy, powerful quirks while marginalizing or even punishing those with powers deemed weak, unattractive, or villainous. Think of it, boy. A child is born with the ability to control minds. Society immediately brands him a potential villain, treats him with suspicion, fears him. Another is born with the ability to create explosions from his hands. He is praised, lauded as a future hero, his aggressive, violent tendencies excused and even encouraged as signs of a strong spirit. Is that justice? Is that equality? Or is it a genetic lottery that determines your worth before you have even taken your first steps? The mention of an explosion quirk hit Izuku like a physical blow. He saw Bakugo's sneering face, felt the heat of a dozen casual explosions on his skin. He had always been told Kaken was amazing, a natural-born hero. He had never once questioned it. But the voice was right. Bakugo's aggression, his cruelty, it had always been excused. Praised even. This society you worship, the voice said, its tone softening once more, becoming intimate, conspiratorial, is a gilded cage. It provides a comforting illusion of safety, but it does so by suppressing true potential and enforcing a rigid, arbitrary hierarchy based on the powers people are born with. It discards anyone who doesn't fit its narrow definition of useful. It discarded you, Izuku Midoriya. It looked at your brilliant mind and deemed it worthless because it wasn't accompanied by a flashy superpower. The voice, this entity known only as Sensei, had perfectly articulated the deep, formless resentment that had been festering in Izuku's heart for years. He had taken all of Izuku's pain, his humiliation, his despair, and forged it into a coherent, razor-sharp ideology. He wasn't just a victim of bullies anymore. He was a victim of a corrupt and broken system. I, and those who follow me, wish to tear down this gilded cage, Sensei declared, a chilling fervor entering his voice. We seek to expose the lie. We seek to create a world of true equality, where a person's worth is measured not by the quirk in their cells, but by the will in their soul. Some would call us villains. I prefer to think of us as surgeons, cutting away the cancer that is hero society so that the world can finally heal. The static on the screen seemed to intensify, the hum growing louder. All Might could not see your worth. Tamura cannot see your worth. But I do. I see a mind that can dissect heroes like a master watchmaker. I see a strategist who can predict his enemies' moves before they are even conceived. I see a leader who can inspire loyalty not through fear or power, but through vision and intellect. I do not need you to throw punches, Izuku Midoriya. I need you to think. I need you to plan. I need you to be the architect of a new world. The voice paused, a final, dramatic silence that hung heavy in the air. Tamura is the symbol of our movement's destructive rage. He is the fist. But every fist needs a brain to guide it. You, Izuku Midoriya, will be that brain. You will be my eyes and ears. My analyst. My apprentice. The offer was laid bare. It wasn't a request to be a grunt, a pawn to be sacrificed. It was an offer of purpose. Of importance. Of power. It was everything he had ever craved, everything All Might had denied him. A small, traitorous part of Izuku's soul, the part that still wore an All Might onesie and dreamed of saving people with a smile, recoiled in horror. This was wrong. This was the path to villainy, to destruction, to everything he had once stood against. But what had standing for it ever gotten him? He looked at his own hands. They were trembling. Quirkless, useless hands. The hands of a Deku. Sensei was right. The world had discarded him. Hero society had rejected him. His idol had broken him. His childhood friend had told him to kill himself. Where was the justice in that world? Where was the heroism? Here, in this dingy bar, speaking to a voice in a machine, he was being offered a place. A value. A purpose. The choice was between a world that saw him as nothing, and a man who saw him as everything. It was no choice at all. He took a deep, shuddering breath, the first truly steady breath he had taken since he'd stepped onto that rooftop. The fear was still there, a cold ember in his gut, but it was being smothered by a new, unfamiliar sensation, resolve. A cold, hard, chilling resolve. He lifted his head, his green eyes, now disturbingly clear and focused, fixed on the static-filled screen. "What do you need me to do?" The voice on the television almost seemed to smile. A low, pleased rumble echoed from the speaker. "Excellent. Kurogyri, provide our new associate with the initial asset file. His first task begins now." Kurogyri, who had remained silent and still as a statue throughout the entire exchange, nodded. He reached under the bar and produced a thin, black manila folder, placing it on the bar top in front of Izuku. It was unmarked. "Your first assignment is an exercise in analysis, a demonstration of the skills I so admire," Sensei's voice explained. "Inside that folder, you will find preliminary information on the incoming first-year hero course students at UA High School. This year's class is particularly noteworthy. I want you to study them, learn their quirks, their personalities, their fighting styles. I want you to dissect their strengths and, more importantly, I want you to find their weaknesses. All of them." Izuku reached out and took the folder. The cheap cardboard felt heavy in his hands, weighted with the significance of his decision. This was his Rubicon. Opening this folder was an act of treason against the world he had once loved. He didn't hesitate. He opened it. The first page was a class roster. 1A. He scanned the names. Aoyama Yuga. Ashido, Mina. Aji Tsuyu. His eyes continued down the list, his brain already beginning to cross-reference the names with what little public information he knew about the UA entrance exam. Then his eyes stopped. Bakugo, Katsuki. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. He saw Kaken's sneering face, heard his cruel laughter. The boy who had tormented him, who had ground his face into the dirt, who had told him to take a swan dive. He felt a phantom pain in his shoulder from an explosion years ago, a ghost of humiliation. The old Izuku would have flinched. He would have been afraid, but the boy who stood in the bar was not the old Izuku. He felt a flicker of emotion, yes, but it wasn't fear. It wasn't even anger. It was a cold, detached, almost predatory interest. Bakugo wasn't Kaken anymore. He wasn't a bully or a rival. He was a name on a list. A target. A variable in an equation. An obstacle to be analyzed, understood, and dismantled. The television screen clicked off, plunging the bar back into near silence, leaving only the hum of the refrigerator and the drip of the faucet. The audience was over. Izuku looked down at the file, at Bakugo's name, and a strange, thin smile touched his lips. It was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was the first truly cold expression he had ever worn. His defense mechanism was complete. The hurt, vulnerable boy was being locked away, deep inside. In his place stood the analyst. The strategist. The apprentice. He flipped to Bakugo's page, his eyes scanning the details of his quirk. A new notebook, a new purpose, was already beginning to form in his mind. Not hero analysis for the future, but something far more dangerous. He was no longer trying to be like them. He was going to learn how to break them. 3 weeks. 3 weeks had passed since Izuku Midoriya had stepped through Kurogyri's portal and into the shadows. His world, once a sprawling map of hero agencies, patrol routes, and hopeful aspirations, had shrunk to the 4 walls of a small, windowless room in the back of a forgotten dive bar. The room was Spartan, a thin mattress on the floor, a single bare bulb overhead, and a cheap folding table that was now the nerve center of his new existence. The walls were no longer covered with the triumphant posters of All Might. They were papered with printouts, pages of data, architectural blueprints downloaded from municipal servers, and grainy satellite photos. In the center of this web of information were the faces of UA's Class 1A. His old world, now pinned to his wall like a butterfly in a collection, an object to be studied, dissected, and broken. He slept little. The ghosts of his former life were too loud in the quiet of the night. He would close his eyes and see his mother's worried face, hear All Might's voice pronouncing his dream dead. But the ghosts grew quieter with each passing day, drowned out by the hum of his laptop and the relentless flood of new data. Analysis was his shield, his purpose, his salvation. He poured his every waking moment into the files Sensei had given him, memorizing quirk limitations, cross-referencing entrance exam footage with middle school athletic records, and building complex psychological profiles from fragments of online data. He was no longer Izuku Midoriya, the hopeful hero fanba. He was a different entity now, something colder and more focused. In the dim light of his room, bathed in the glow of his monitor, he was simply the analyst. His interaction with the League's other members was minimal. Kurojairi provided him with meals, silent and efficient, sometimes offering a quiet word of encouragement that felt more like a progress check. Shigaraki, on the other hand, treated him with a festering, contemptuous silence. The unstable man-child would sometimes stand in the doorway of Izuku's room, his red eye glaring from behind the hand mask, just watching. Izuku learned to ignore him, to treat him as another environmental variable, like the leaky faucet or the faulty refrigerator. The tense peace was shattered on a Tuesday afternoon meeting. Now, Shigaraki's raspy voice grated from the main bar area. It wasn't a request. Izuku saved his work, a detailed analysis of Momo Yaoyoro's lipid dependency for her creation quirk, and walked into the main room. Kurojairi was behind the bar, polishing the same glass as always. Shigaraki was hunched over the bar top, a crumpled city map spread out before him. He was tapping a manic finger on a location in the bustling commercial heart of the city. "It's time we made a statement," Shigaraki announced, not looking at Izuku but at his own reflection in a dusty bottle. "The hero world has gotten lazy since All Might got weakened at the USJ. They think we're just a bunch of low-level thugs who got lucky. We need to remind them that the game has changed. We need to hit them where it hurts." Izuku stepped closer, his eyes scanning the map. Shigaraki's finger was tapping on a brightly colored logo. The All Might Superstore, the flagship location for all officially licensed Symbol of Peace merchandise. "We hit this place," Shigaraki continued, a sick glee in his voice. "Prime time. We smash the place to bits, take the cash, and burn every last one of those stupid, smiling dolls. It's symbolic. We're tearing down their false idol, literally." Izuku remained silent, his mind already whirring, processing the plan with the cold, detached logic he now applied to everything. He ran the variables, the probabilities, the response time calculations he had memorized from stolen police dispatch logs. Kurojairi was the first to voice a reservation. "Tamura Shigaraki, that area is heavily patrolled. The hero response time would be exceptionally fast." "That's the point," Shigaraki snapped, scratching furiously at his neck. "We're not trying to be sneaky. We're sending a message. We show up, cause a massive amount of chaos, and you warp us out before they can pin us down. It's a classic boss rush. Overwhelm them, get the loot, and teleport out. Easy." Izuku stared at the map. He could see it all play out in his head. The smashing glass, the screaming civilians, the inevitable arrival of the heroes. He could see Endeavor's flames, best genus fibers, the swarm of lesser-known pros who would flood the area within minutes. It wasn't a plan. It was a tantrum with a getaway vehicle. He had to speak. His value here was his mind. If he stayed silent, he was just another piece of furniture. "It's a bad plan," he said. The words were quiet, but they landed in the bar with the force of a grenade. The scratching at Shigaraki's neck stopped. The room went dead silent, save for the incessant drip, drip, drip from the sink. Shigaraki turned his head slowly, the movement stiff and reptilian. His single visible eye was blazing with a furious, murderous light. "What did you say? NPC?" Izuku felt a tremor of the old fear, the primal instinct to shrink back, to apologize, to make himself small. He crushed it. He met Shigaraki's glare, his own expression a carefully constructed mask of calm analysis. "I said it's a bad plan," he repeated, his voice steady. "The risk-to-reward ratio is profoundly negative." "Risk-to-reward?" Shigaraki hissed, stepping away from the bar. "This isn't one of your little nerd games. This is about chaos. Chaos without purpose is just noise," Izuku countered, his confidence growing as he shifted onto the familiar ground of logic. He pointed a finger at the map. "Objective 1, steal money. We don't need money, Sensei provides for us. The objective is irrelevant. Objective 2, destroy merchandise. A symbolic gesture, yes, but one with no lasting strategic impact. The store is insured. It will be rebuilt in a week, and the media will spin it as a story of heroic resilience. You won't be tearing down a symbol, you'll be reinforcing it. He took a breath and continued, his words coming faster now, a torrent of pure data. The location is a tactical nightmare. It's 3 blocks from Endeavor's main agency. According to his published patrol schedules, he favors the West District on Tuesdays, meaning he'll be less than 2 kilometers away. His average response time to a high-level threat in that proximity is 1 minute and 23 seconds. Best Jeanist agency is 7 blocks in the other direction. He'll be there in under 3 minutes. Before either of them arrive, at least a dozen sidekick-level heroes will converge on the location. You're not planning a raid, you're planning an ambush on ourselves. Shigaraki stared at him, his mouth slightly agape behind the hand. He was clearly stunned by the sheer volume and specificity of Izuku's analysis. Kurogyri, however, tilted his misty head, a clear sign of interest. The greatest flaw, Izuku concluded, pressing his advantage, is that the plan is loud. It's designed to draw attention. Attention is the currency of the heroes. You would be playing their game by their rules on their home turf. They will win, even if you escape. They'll be hailed as saviors who drove off the villains, and will be portrayed as petty criminals who threw a meaningless tantrum. We will have gained nothing and they will have gained public approval. The net result is a strategic loss for us. For a long moment, the only sound was Shigaraki's ragged breathing. Then, with a guttural roar of frustration, he lunged. His hand, all 5 fingers spread wide, shot out towards Izuku's face. You think you're so smart, you quirkless little. A wall of purple mist erupted between them. Kurogyri had moved, his form intercepting Shigaraki's arm. Tamura Shigaraki. That is enough. He's undermining me, Kurogyri. Shigaraki shrieked, struggling against the warp gate's strange, unyielding texture. He's Sensei's new pet, and he thinks he can just. He is making a logical argument, Kurogyri stated, his voice as calm as ever. If his analysis is correct, then your proposed course of action is, as he stated, a strategic loss. Sensei expects results, not noise. The mention of Sensei was, as always, a bucket of cold water on Shigaraki's rage. He retracted his hand, glaring at Izuku with pure, undiluted hatred. Fine, he spat. Fine. If the little NPC is so smart, what's his brilliant plan? What high-level quest has he designed for us, huh? Steal some candy from a baby? Tip over a garbage can? The challenge was laid. This was his moment. His gambit. Izuku walked past the furious Shigaraki and took a laptop from under the bar. He placed it down and opened it, turning the screen for the others to see. On it was a complex diagram of a sleek, modern office building. Our goal should not be to make noise, Izuku said, his voice now imbued with a chilling authority. It should be to acquire power. Not the power to smash things, but the power of information. The power to cripple our enemies from the inside out, before they even know we're a threat. He pointed to the logo at the top of the building's schematics. This is the headquarters of Aegis Support Systems. Never heard of them, Shigaraki grumbled, crossing his arms. You're not supposed to, Izuku replied. They're not heroes. They're not a bank. They are a private contractor who designs and maintains secure communication networks and data management software for over 60% of the pro-hero agencies in this prefecture, including Endeavor's. Kurogyri's yellow eyes seemed to widen slightly. Their data security would be immense. It is, Izuku confirmed. But it's not perfect. No system built by humans is. He began to talk, and as he did, he brought up satellite images, security patrol rosters, and employee social media profiles on the screen. His voice was a calm, steady river of information, weaving a plan so intricate and precise it was terrifying. Aegis HQ runs on a skeleton crew after 10 p.m. Their primary physical security is a patrol team of 3 guards, all retired C-list heroes with minor enhancement quirks. Predictable. Their patrol route is a 27-minute loop. I have it mapped right here. He highlighted a path on the blueprint. They have motion sensors, but there's a blind spot on the northeast corner of the building, where the main ventilation shaft for the server farm connects to the roof. A disgruntled ex-employee complained on an online forum about how the maintenance crews always left the access panel unlocked up there. He zoomed in on the roof. This is where you come in, Kurogyri. A warp gate onto the roof. The city is forecasting a severe thunderstorm for tonight between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. The rain and wind will mask any noise we make, and the lightning strikes could provide a plausible cover for any minor energy fluctuations we cause inside. He then looked directly at Shigaraki. We enter through the ventilation shaft. It leads directly to the server farm's maintenance corridor. The door to the server room itself is a digital, mag-locked security door. It's tied to the building's main power. A precise, 5-fingered touch to the junction box next to the door should be enough to decay the lock's internal mechanism without triggering a full system-wide alarm. Shigaraki's eye twitched. Izuku was giving him a crucial role, one that only he and his quirk could perform. It was a calculated move, designed to appease his ego, to make him a necessary part of the plan's success. Once inside, Izuku continued, his focus returning to the laptop. We are not after everything. A mass data download would take too long and would immediately trigger their system's security protocols. We are surgical. We are after 3 specific data caches. He brought up 3 folders on the screen, labeled with stark, simple titles. 1. Assets. This contains the complete financial records for every hero agency under contract. Bank statements, sponsorship deals, side business investments. It's a treasure trove of potential leverage and blackmail. 2. Personnel. This contains the non-public records of their client heroes. Most importantly, their mandatory psychological evaluations. Imagine what the Hero Public Safety Commission would do if the public found out about Endeavor's anger management issues, or if another hero's gambling addiction came to light. 3. Systems. This is the grand prize. It contains the technical schematics and source code for their secure communication devices. With this, we could potentially decrypt hero communications in real time. We would know their strategies, their locations, their weaknesses, as they happen. He closed the laptop, the sudden silence punctuating his presentation. No smashing. No noise. No pointless destruction. We go in like ghosts, take what we need, and leave without a trace. By the time they even realize they've been compromised, if they realize at all, we will be holding the keys to their kingdom. We will have acquired a weapon far more powerful than anything you can buy in a store. He looked from a stunned Kurogyri to a silent, seething Shigaraki. He had laid his cards on the table. This was his proof of concept. His application for the role he was promised. Kurogyri was the one who broke the silence. The plan is flawless. The level of detail is extraordinary. Shigaraki just stared at Izuku, his expression unreadable behind the hand. The hatred was still there, but it was now mixed with something else, a grudging, resentful understanding. He had been so utterly and completely outclassed that he had no counter-argument. He had proposed a street brawl, and Izuku had responded with a plan for nuclear espionage. Sensei will be pleased, Kurogyri said, a statement that was both a promise and a final verdict. Shigaraki let out a frustrated hiss, like air from a punctured tire. Fine, he bit out. We'll try the NPC's stupidly complicated side quest. But if it fails, if one thing goes wrong, I'm turning your head into a pile of dust. Izuku simply nodded. It won't fail. Night fell, and with it came the storm. Rain lashed against the windows of the bar, and distant thunder rumbled like a hungry beast. Izuku sat at his table, now converted into a command center. His laptop was open, displaying a live feed of the building's exterior from a hacked public traffic camera down the street. A second monitor showed a schematic of the building, with 3 blinking dots, blue for Kurogyri, red for Shigaraki, and white for the hard drive they carried, that he would move manually based on their reports. A cheap headset was looped over his neck. He was not a field operative. He was the eye in the sky. The man in the chair. Kurogyri. Shigaraki. Report, he said into the headset's microphone, his voice unnaturally calm. We are in position on the adjacent rooftop. Kurogyri's smooth voice came back. Ready for deployment on your mark. This is stupid, Shigaraki's voice crackled. I feel like a character in a bad stealth game. When do I get to disintegrate something? You get to disintegrate the lock. That's the objective, Izuku replied coolly. Stick to the plan. Kurogyri, the guard patrol just passed the northeast corner. You have a 27-minute window. The wind is at 30 knots. Execute now. Acknowledged. Izuku watched the traffic cam feed. For a moment, there was nothing but rain-slick streets. Then, on the roof of the Aegis building, the air shimmered. A dark purple oval opened, and two figures stepped out onto the wet rooftop before the portal vanished as silently as it had appeared. Phase 1 was complete. We're on the roof, Kurogyri reported. Moving to the ventilation access point. This roof is slippery, Shigaraki complained. If I fall, I'm blaming you. Don't fall, Izuku said flatly, his eyes flicking to another window on his screen, monitoring the building's internal power grid for any suspicious spikes. The access panel should be 10 meters from your position, directly north. There was a moment of silence, then, got it, Kurogyri said. The ex-employee was correct. The lock is rusted and the panel is unsecured. We are proceeding into the shaft. Izuku moved the blinking dots on his schematic from the roof into the building's ventilation system. He felt a strange, detached thrill. It was like one of his old analysis simulations, but the pieces on the board were real. The stakes were real. The next few minutes were tense. Izuku guided them through the maze of vents, his instructions crisp and precise. Take the next right fork. Descend 2 levels. The maintenance corridor will be on your left. The grating is secured with standard bolts. He heard the faint sound of scraping metal through the comms as Shigaraki presumably worked on the grating. We're in the corridor, Kurogyri confirmed. No alarms. The server room door is 30 meters ahead. Proceed. The guard patrol is now on the opposite side of the building. You have approximately 15 minutes before they loop back around. He watched the dots move down the hallway on his map. He could hear Shigaraki's impatient breathing over the comms. This was the most delicate part of the operation. Okay, I'm at the junction box, Shigaraki rasped. It's small. The mechanism is delicate, Izuku instructed, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. Do not decay the entire box, just the internal locking bolt. A light, 2-second touch with all 5 fingers should be enough to sever the connection without shorting out the whole floor. Don't tell me how to use my quirk, nerd. There was a pregnant pause. Izuku held his breath. He heard a soft fizz and a faint crackle of static. It's done, Shigaraki said, a hint of pride in his voice. The light on the panel went from green to red. The door is dead. A wave of relief washed over Izuku. Good. Get inside, locate the primary server terminal. It's the one with the glowing blue trim. Kurogyri, you have the drive. Plug it in. The software I installed on it will automatically locate and copy the 3 target files. Do not touch anything else. The next 3 minutes were the longest of Izuku's life. He watched a fictional progress bar in his mind, his eyes darting between the camera feed and the power grid monitor. Everything was stable. Everything was quiet. The perfect crime. The files are copying, Kurogyri reported. 35%. It was going too smoothly. Izuku's analytical mind, trained to look for flaws and worst-case scenarios, screamed that something had to go wrong. 50%. His eyes scanned the patrol route map. The guards were making their turn. They were ahead of schedule. By his estimate, they had 7 minutes left, not 10. Kurogyri, you need to hurry. The patrol is moving faster than anticipated. 70%. This is boring, Shigaraki muttered. I'm gonna look around. Negative, Shigaraki. Izuku snapped, his voice sharp. Stay put. Don't touch anything. Don't tell me what to do. There was the sound of shuffling feet. Shigaraki, I am monitoring the internal sensors. One unauthorized contact with a server rack and it will trigger a silent alarm directly to the security office. A tense silence. Then, a defeated sigh. Fine. 95%, Kurogyri said. Almost there. Izuku's heart was hammering. The guards were turning onto the server farm corridor. 4 minutes. Copy complete. Drive secured. Get out of there now. Izuku commanded. Back to the ventilation shaft. Retrace your steps exactly. Move. He guided them back with frantic, clipped instructions. As they sealed the grating in the maintenance corridor behind them, he saw the guard's flashlight beams sweep across the far end of the hall on an internal camera he'd managed to piggyback. They had made it out with less than a minute to spare. 5 minutes later, the purple portal opened in the middle of the bar. Shigaraki and Kurogyari stepped through, dripping rainwater onto the floorboards. Shigaraki was sullen and silent. Kurogyari, however, held up the small black hard drive. "The objective has been secured," he announced. Izuku felt a dizzying rush of triumph. He had done it. His plan, his analysis, his strategy, it had worked perfectly. He took the drive from Kurogyari, his hands surprisingly steady, and plugged it into his main computer. With a few keystrokes, he bypassed the encryption. The files were there. Financials. Psyche evals. Schematics. He clicked open a random file under Personnel. The face of a well-known B-list hero filled the screen, attached to a therapist's report detailing a crippling fear of enclosed spaces. A claustrophobic hero. The potential for blackmail was sickeningly potent. Just then, the old television behind the bar crackled to life. "Excellent work," Sensei's voice resonated through the room, filled with a deep, palpable satisfaction. Shigaraki stiffened, turning to the screen. "Izuku Midoriya," the voice continued. "Your performance was exemplary. You have provided us with a weapon that will be instrumental in the war to come. You have proven your worth beyond all doubt." The praise was direct, absolute, and intoxicating. It was everything Izuku had craved. Then, the voice turned its attention to the other figure in the room. "Tamura. I trust you were paying attention. This is true power, not the petulant power to destroy a storefront, but the strategic power to cripple your enemy before they even know they are in a fight. This is the path to victory. Learn from it." The humiliation in the voice's tone was as sharp as glass. Shigaraki stood frozen for a moment, his fists clenched at his sides. He looked at Izuku, his single eye burning with a toxic mixture of fury, jealousy, and newfound, resentful respect. He didn't see a quirkless NPC anymore. He saw a rival. A true rival for Sensei's favor. Without a word, Shigaraki turned and stormed out of the room, slamming the door to his own quarters so hard that a bottle rattled on the shelf. The TV screen went black. Izuku was alone with Kurogyari, the hum of the computers filling the silence. He looked at the screen, at the stolen secrets of the heroes he once worshipped. He felt no remorse. No guilt. He felt a cold, clear sense of accomplishment. He had been told he was worthless, a liability. Tonight he had become the single most valuable asset in the League of Villains. He had proven his worth not with a fist, but with his mind. A small, chilling smile touched his lips. His gambit had paid off. The game had begun, and he had just taken the hero's queen. The victory at Aegis Support Systems was a silent one, a ghost of a crime that the hero world had yet to even notice. For Izuku, however, it was a thunderclap. It had cemented his position, proven his methodology, and earned him the one thing he craved more than anything, Sensei's genuine approval. He was no longer the charity case, the quirkless boy dragged in from an alley. He was the League's master strategist, a title unspoken but understood by all except for Tamura Shigaraki. The League's de facto leader had grown more volatile, his moods swinging between sullen silence and fits of scratching, agitated rage. He watched Izuku with a venomous jealousy, the success of the Aegis heist a constant, galling reminder of his own public humiliation at Sensei's hands. He needed a win. He needed to prove that his path of direct, chaotic destruction was still the true heart of the League. He found his opportunity in a piece of intelligence Kurogyari procured through his underworld contacts, a leaked UA schedule. Here, Shigaraki rasped, slamming the printed sheet onto the bar one evening. The single word was soaked in a desperate, aggressive energy. "This is our next level." The final boss, Izuku, who had been cross-referencing the stolen Aegis financial data with known Yakuza front companies, looked up from his laptop. On the paper, a single event was circled in angry red ink: Class 1A Rescue Training, Unforeseen Simulation Joint USJ. Below it, in smaller print, Supervising Instructors, Eraserhead, 13, and All Might. Shigaraki's visible eye was alight with a feverish, almost religious zeal. We're going to the USJ. And we are going to kill All Might. The old Izuku would have been horrified. The very concept of killing his idol, of attacking his dream school, would have been anathema. The current Izuku felt only a cold, clinical curiosity. He picked up the schedule, his eyes scanning the details. His mind, now a finely tuned engine of strategic analysis, began to churn. It's a sound concept, Izuku said, his voice level. Attacking the symbol of peace at a training facility for children would create a powerful narrative of Hero Society's failure to protect its own. The symbolic value is high. Shigaraki seemed momentarily taken aback. He had expected an argument, another lecture on subtlety. So you agree? We go in, I use my new toy to smash him, and we win. The concept is sound, Izuku clarified, his gaze becoming distant as he processed 1,000 variables at once. Your plan, however, is incomplete. It's a single objective with no contingency. It's a brute force attack. It's loud. He used the word deliberately, the same criticism he'd leveled against the All Might Superstore idea. And loud can be effective, but only if it's the right kind of loud. What you're proposing is a scream. I'm proposing a symphony. He stood up and walked to the large wall in the main bar area, which he had converted into a massive corkboard. It was already covered with notes and photos of Class 1A. He took the schedule from Shigaraki's hand and pinned it in the center. Our objective is not simply to kill All Might, Izuku began, his voice taking on the cadence of a professor lecturing his students. He picked up a black marker. That is the primary goal, yes, but it is not the only goal. A true victory is multi-layered. We will not just try to kill their symbol. We will aim to psychologically shatter the next generation of heroes. We will aim to expose the fatal flaws in UA's security and curriculum. And most importantly, we will aim to irrevocably destroy the public's trust in All Might and the institution he represents. He began to write on the board around the schedule, his handwriting neat and precise. Operation Broken Pedestal. Primary objective, terminate All Might. Secondary objectives, 1. Inflict lasting psychological trauma on Class 1A students. 2. Publicly expose UA's security inadequacies. 3. Capture and broadcast the defeat of All Might to maximize public terror. Shigaraki watched, his resentment warring with a grudging fascination. Kurojairi stood behind the bar, his misty form utterly still, absorbing every word. The core of your plan, Izuku said, turning back to Shigaraki, is your new toy. Tell me about it. Shigaraki's lips curled into a hideous grin behind his mask. Sensei and the doctor provided him. They call him Nomu. He's a mindless puppet, engineered with shock absorption and super regeneration. He was made to withstand All Might's punches. Bioengineering, Izuku murmured, his mind racing. High-end. Shock absorption is a direct counter to kinetic force users. But withstanding is not the same as defeating. We can't just throw it at him and hope for the best. The Nomu is not a weapon, it is a tool. A scalpel to be applied with precision. For the next several hours, Izuku outlined his vision. It was a terrifying masterpiece of psychological warfare and tactical cruelty, built upon the foundation of his intimate, obsessive knowledge of heroes. First, the infiltration. He meticulously detailed how Kurojairi would act as the forward scout, his warp gate quirk allowing him to bypass the perimeter alarms by manifesting inside the facility. He would use a small, targeted EMP device, something easily acquired on the black market, to disable the internal communication systems before the main force arrived, cutting the heroes off from the outside world. Second, the deployment. This was where Izuku's plan diverged most sharply from Shigaraki's desire for a simple brawl. We will not engage them as a single mob, Izuku explained, pointing to a blueprint of the USJ he had acquired. The facility is divided into distinct disaster zones, a shipwreck zone, a landslide zone, a fire zone, etc. This is by design, to separate students into smaller groups. We will use their own training ground against them. Kurojairi will not just open one gate. He will open dozens, simultaneously scattering our forces and the students across the entire facility. We create chaos, but it is a controlled, directed chaos. He began to pin photos of the low-level thugs Shigaraki had recruited to the different zones on the map. It was here that his analysis of Class 1A became lethally practical. The shipwreck zone, he said, tapping the large body of water. We deploy villains with aquatic or long-range quirks. This area will be the primary target for 3 students, Ajui Tsuyu, whose frog quirk makes her a significant threat in water. Midoriya, no, wait. He paused, a flicker of a forgotten life crossing his face, before he corrected himself. The analysis is from before. Let's assume the new user of One for All is among them. And Mineta Minoru, whose pop-off quirk is surprisingly effective for immobilization. We tie them up there, where their skill sets are most applicable, using villains who counter them directly. We don't try to defeat them, merely to contain them. Keep them busy. He moved across the map, his marker flying. The landslide zone. Perfect for pinning down students with brute force quirks, like Kirishima, Aijiro and Sato, Rikido. We use villains with earth manipulation quirks. Again, containment, not annihilation. The fire zone, Todoroki, Shoto, is the primary threat here. He has both fire and ice. However, his psychological profile suggests a deep-seated reluctance to use his fire abilities. We exploit this. We deploy villains who are immune to ice but vulnerable to fire. We force him into a position where he must either use the power he hates, or watch his classmates get hurt. Psychological warfare. He continued on, a chillingly precise god arranging his battle lines. He assigned specific villain types to counter every single student he had profiled. He knew their strengths, their weaknesses, their fighting styles, and he crafted a specific scenario designed to exploit them. For Bakugo, Katsuki, he assigned villains who could force him into a close-quarters brawl where his large-scale explosions would endanger his own allies, neutralizing his greatest advantage. The goal for the cannon fodder, Izuku summarized, stepping back from the board, is not to win. It is to stall. To injure. To terrify. We bog the students down, separate them from their teachers, and make them feel utterly, hopelessly alone. We break their spirit before we even touch their bodies. Finally, he turned to the entrance area, where Eraserhead and 13 would be. This is the linchpin, he said, his voice dropping. Eraserhead, Shota Aizawa. His quirk, Erasure, is the single greatest threat to our entire force, especially to you, Shigaraki, and to the Noma. He must be neutralized first, and with extreme prejudice. He looked directly at Shigaraki. This is where your Noma comes in. But not against All Might. Not yet. Its first target is Eraserhead. Aizawa is a master of stealth and ambush tactics. He will strike first. We let him. We sacrifice a few of the weaker thugs to draw him in. Once he is engaged and his position is revealed, you deploy the Noma. Its strength is not just for punching, it's for grappling, for holding a target. The Noma will pin Aizawa. It will break him. Not kill him, not immediately. It will disable him in a brutal, visible way, right in front of the students who can see the entrance. We need to show them that even their teachers, their protectors, are fragile and can be broken. The sheer, calculated cruelty of the idea hung in the air. Shigaraki let out a low, raspy chuckle of appreciation. This was the kind of violence he understood. And All Might? He asked. Izuku's expression turned cold. All Might is the finale. My analysis of him, combined with Sensei's information, points to a severe time limit on his powered form. He's running on fumes. The attack on the USJ is not just an attack, it's a clock. Every second the students are in peril, every minute the other teachers are occupied, is a minute All Might is forced to waste his limited power just getting to the location. By the time he arrives, he will already be weakened. He tapped the center of the USJ map. We let him fight. We let him tear through our grunts. We let him believe he is winning. Then, when he is tired, when he has expended his energy saving the students, you and the Noma will confront him. Kurogiri will use his warp gate to limit his mobility, cutting off his escape routes and preventing him from building up speed for his powerful smashes. The Nomu, with its shock absorption, will act as a wall, a tireless sponge for his attacks. It will wear him down, punch for punch, until he is exhausted. Until he is on his knees. Izuku turned from the board, his green eyes boring into Shigaraki's. and that is when you deliver the final blow. But the most important part of the plan comes last. Kurogyri will have one small, remote-controlled warp gate open, linked to a hidden camera, broadcasting a live feed to a list of media outlets and conspiracy theory websites that I have already compiled. The world will not just hear that All Might has fallen, they will watch it happen. They will see their symbol of peace, bloody and broken, being disintegrated by your hand. That is how you create perfect pandemonium. That is how you win. He stepped back from the board. It was no longer a collection of notes. It was a tapestry of terror, every thread woven with meticulous, psychopathic precision. It was flawless. For the first time since Izuku had arrived, Shigaraki looked at him with something other than hatred. It was a dark, twisted form of respect. The respect of one monster for another. Okay, nerd, Shigaraki rasped, a slow, wide grin spreading behind his mask. I'm starting to like your style. Let's go kill a hero. The unforeseen simulation joint was an architectural marvel, a colossal dome that housed a dozen different meticulously crafted disaster scenarios. It was a playground of heroism, designed to teach the next generation how to save lives. Today, it would become their abattoir. Izuku was not on the front lines. His place was in the shadows, miles away, back in the dim light of the bar. His table was now a true command center. One monitor displayed the hacked UA security schematics, showing him the location of every sensor. Another showed a live audio feed, patched in through a micro-receiver Kurogyri had attached to his own metal neck brace. A third screen was black, waiting for the live video feed. He was the conductor, and his orchestra of villains was about to begin their performance. Kurogyri status, Izuku said into his headset, his voice a low, steady monotone. I am inside the dome, came the reply, the sound crisp. The air is clear. No heroes present besides Aizawa and 13. The students of Class 1A are all accounted for. And All Might? Not present. It seems there was a delay. He used up his time on his commute this morning. Izuku felt a flicker of disappointment, quickly suppressed. A minor deviation. The plan was robust enough to handle it. Unfortunate, but it doesn't change the secondary objectives. Disabling the communications is now your top priority. Proceed. Understood. A moment later, Izuku saw the internal comms network on his schematic flicker from green to red. Signal lost, he confirmed. Phase 1 complete. Shigaraki, the stage is set. Bring down the house. He listened intently as he heard Shigaraki's gleeful, distorted voice through the audio feed. Hello, UA High School. We are the League of Villains. And we're here to play. Then came the sounds of chaos. The swirling vortex of Kurogyri's mass warp gate, the surprised shouts of the students, the sudden eruption of dozens of villains into the heart of the facility. He listened as Aizawa barked orders, as 13 tried to get the students to safety. It was all going according to the script. Kurogyri, scatter them, Izuku ordered. He heard the distinct sound of warping, followed by the terrified screams of the students as they were pulled through portals and deposited across the various zones, just as he had planned. He could hear Bakugo's enraged explosions from what he deduced was the ruins zone, and the splash of water from the shipwreck zone. The board was set. The pieces were in motion. The first major engagement began. Eraserhead is on the move, Kurogyri reported. He's descending the main stairs. Engaging our vanguard. Izuku listened to the sounds of the fight. The sharp thud of Aizawa's capture weapon, the pained grunts of villains whose quirks had been suddenly erased, the clean, efficient sounds of a pro hero at work. Aizawa was a whirlwind, disabling a dozen low-tier villains in under a minute. He was exactly as formidable as Izuku's analysis had predicted. Shigaraki, he's drawing him in, Izuku said calmly. Let him feel confident. Let him overextend. Deploy the Nomu on my mark? He heard Shigaraki's impatient hiss. Just give the order. Aizawa worked his way to the bottom of the stairs, closer and closer to the plaza where Shigaraki and the Nomu waited. He was a blur of black cloth and flying bandages, a dance of deadly efficiency. Now, Izuku said, his voice cold as ice. He heard Shigaraki's triumphant cry. Noma! Get him! The audio feed was filled with a sudden, sickening crunch of bone and a strangled cry of pain from Aizawa. The efficient, graceful sounds of combat were replaced by brutal, wet thuds. Target acquired, Kurojire's voice reported, a chillingly calm narrator to the violence. The Nomu has pinned Eraserhead. His arm is broken. Now the other. Another crunch. Another scream, this one cut short. His head is now being driven into the pavement. Izuku closed his eyes, visualizing the scene. The students, trapped in their zones but able to see the plaza, were watching their teacher being systematically, brutally dismantled by an unstoppable monster. Objective 1. Inflict psychological trauma. In progress. He listened as the students fought back across the facility. He heard explosions, the crackle of ice, the shouts of his villainous pawns. But the heroes in training were more resilient than he'd anticipated. They were winning their small skirmishes. It didn't matter. They were only serving their purpose, to be occupied. To be terrified. To be witnesses. Then, the moment the entire plan had been waiting for. A massive crash echoed from the main entrance of the USJ, a sound so loud it distorted the audio feed. He's here, Kurojire stated. Izuku opened his eyes. A grim smile touched his lips. All Might had arrived. And he was not smiling. The audio feed became a cacophony of pure power. The sound of wind rushing, of punches that broke the sound barrier, of villains being thrown like rag dolls. All Might was a force of nature, clearing a path through the remaining grunts with terrifying speed. He's faster than the data suggested, Izuku noted aloud, making a mental note. His anger is amplifying his output. He heard All Might's enraged roar upon seeing Aizawa's broken form. He listened as All Might charged the Nomu, the sound of their first collision a sonic boom that made the microphone crackle. Shigaraki, Kurojire, engage, Izuku commanded. Box him in. Don't let him build momentum. The fight was brutal. Izuku could hear the relentless, meaty thuds of All Might's fists connecting with the Nomu's shock-absorbing flesh. They were doing nothing. He heard Kurojire opening and closing portals, forcing All Might to constantly readjust, preventing him from landing a decisive, full-power smash. He heard Shigaraki's taunts, his mad laughter, as he tried to get close enough to decay the hero. This was the core of the plan, attrition. The Nomu was the anvil, All Might's own waning power was the hammer, and they were simply waiting for him to break himself upon it. The fight raged on for what felt like an eternity. Punch after punch, 100 punches, each one a little weaker than the last. Izuku monitored the time. All Might had been on site for several minutes now. His limit had to be approaching. He's slowing down. Shigaraki shrieked into the mic, his voice filled with manic glee. The big boss is running out of HP. Press the attack, Izuku ordered. Nomu, focus on restraining him. Kurojire, bisect him. Go for the kill shot. He heard the warp gate open, the Nomu's grunt of exertion, and All Might's pain shout as half his body was trapped in a portal, the creature's massive hands digging into his side, right where his old injury was. This was it. The moment of victory. Kurojire, activate the video feed. Now! Izuku commanded, his fingers poised over his own keyboard. His third monitor flickered to life. The image was shaky, broadcast from a small camera Kurojire had affixed to a nearby rock. But the picture was horribly clear. All Might, the symbol of peace, was caught, bleeding from his side, steam beginning to pour from his body. The Nomu held him fast, and Shigaraki was reaching out with his decaying hand, aiming for the hero's face. Goodbye, All Might, Shigaraki's voice rasped, both in his ears and from the laptop's speakers. Izuku's finger hovered over the enter key, ready to distribute the feed to the world. Ready to broadcast the death of a god. Then, something the plan had not accounted for. An explosion. Ice. The roar of a young lion. Bakugo, Todoroki, and the One for All user had broken free. They had defeated their containment squads and had arrived at the last possible second. Bakugo blasted the Nomu's side, forcing it to release its grip. Todoroki froze its legs to the ground. The boy with green lightning crackling around him. He was preparing a punch of his own. Izuku watched, his expression hardening. An unforeseen variable. The student's potential was greater than his data had suggested. He had underestimated them. It was a mistake he would not make again. The tide of the battle shifted in an instant. All Might, freed, saw his chance. He knew he was on a timer. He knew he had to end it now. You may have heard these words before. All Might's voice boomed through the speakers, full of a renewed, desperate power. But I'll teach you what they really mean. What followed was not a fight. It was an extinction event. Go beyond. Plus. Ultra. Izuku could only listen, and watch on the small, shaky screen, as All Might unleashed a storm of punches so fast, and so powerful they defied physics. The gnome with shock absorption was overwhelmed. It couldn't dissipate that much kinetic energy at once. Each punch was stronger than the last, driving the creature back, breaking its frozen legs, shattering the very ground beneath it. The final punch sent the gnome flying out of the USJ entirely, a black speck disappearing into the sky. The resulting shockwave shattered the camera, and the video feed died, plunging Izuku back into the world of audio only. He sat in stunned silence. It was a catastrophic failure of his primary objective. All Might was not dead. He was standing victorious, but as the sounds of approaching sirens grew louder, as he heard Shigaraki screaming in frustration before being shot by the hero snipe, as Kurojairi warped them away in a desperate retreat, Izuku realized something. He listened to the audio from the aftermath. The terrified, crying students. The grievously injured teachers. The arrival of the other pros, their faces grim as they surveyed the carnage. He heard a reporter, having broken the police line, speaking in a hushed, horrified tone about the sheer scale of the villain attack and the vulnerability of UA. His primary objective had failed, but his secondary objectives, they had been a resounding success. He looked at his corkboard, at the neatly written list. Inflict psychological trauma. Done. Expose UA's security inadequacies. Done. Destroy public trust. The seeds were sown. He had lost the battle, but the first shot in the war for public perception had been a devastating one. UA, the safest place in the country, had become a war zone. The next generation of heroes had been bloodied and terrorized. The villains had demonstrated a level of coordination and power previously thought impossible. The door to the bar slammed open, and Kurojairi materialized, supporting a wounded and furious Shigaraki, who was clutching his bleeding arm and leg. You failed, Shigaraki snarled at Izuku, his voice trembling with pain and rage. Your perfect plan failed. All Might is still alive. Izuku slowly took off his headset and turned in his chair, his face a mask of cold, unnerving calm. Yes. He is, Izuku said. But look at what we accomplished. Look at the fear we created. All Might won the fight, but he lost something far more important today, his mystique. The world just saw that the symbol of peace can be fought. That he can be bled. We didn't kill him today, Tamura. We just made him mortal. He stood up and walked to the board, picking up a red marker. With a decisive stroke, he drew a line through the primary objective. But he left the secondary objectives untouched. They were victories. This wasn't a failure, Izuku said, his voice dropping to a near whisper as a new, grander strategy began to form in his mind. This was a test. A data-gathering exercise, and I had just acquired a wealth of new information. He looked at the defeated, wounded Shigaraki, and for the first time, he felt a genuine sense of superiority. Shigaraki saw only the failed objective. Izuku saw the long game. He saw the cracks he had just created in the very foundation of Heroes Society. Next time, Izuku said, his eyes glowing with a cold, analytical fire, there will be no mistakes. And in that moment, Shigaraki knew, with a certainty that chilled him to his marrow, that he was no longer looking at an apprentice. He was looking at the future. The aftermath of the USJ attack was a storm, and the League of Villains was at its eye. For the world outside their dingy bar, it was a maelstrom of fear, outrage, and recrimination. UA High School, once a bastion of unshakable security, was now the subject of intense media scrutiny and parental panic. The image of a bleeding All Might, though victorious, had been seared into the public consciousness. He was no longer an invincible god. He was a warrior who could be wounded, a pillar that could, perhaps, be toppled. Inside the bar, however, the storm was of a different nature. Shigaraki was a tempest of raw, undirected fury. His bullet wounds, healed by one of Sensei's illicit doctors, had left thin, puckered scars that he scratched at with the same manic energy he applied to his neck. The failure to kill All Might was a personal, gnawing wound to his ego. He saw the USJ incident as a humiliating loss, a botched boss fight where he'd been forced to use an escape scroll. He spent his days pacing, muttering about respawn points and game overs, his anger a palpable, suffocating presence in the small space. Izuku, by contrast, was an ocean of calm. He saw the bigger picture. He spent his days and nights immersed in the fallout, not as a defeated general, but as a sociologist studying the results of a grand experiment. He had dozens of monitors and news feeds running simultaneously, his room a cacophony of panicked anchors, grim-faced analysts, and heated political debates. He was charting the currents of public opinion, measuring the seismic shockwaves of fear his plan had sent through society. He had created a spreadsheet, meticulously logging every mention of the League. He tracked keywords. Fear, Yui failure, villain coordination, All Might's limits. The numbers were climbing. Fear was a virus, and he had just successfully engineered its outbreak. He was learning that the most potent weapon was not a fist or a quirk, but a narrative. And right now, he was writing the most terrifying story the world had ever read. This fundamental difference in perspective, Shigaraki's obsession with the tactical loss versus Izuku's focus on the strategic gain, was a chasm growing between them. Shigaraki saw a failed mission, Izuku saw a successful proof of concept. The next major variable in his equation appeared not with a bang, but with a whisper, a series of bloody rumors from the back alleys of Hosa City. Have you heard the talk, Tamura Shigaraki? Kurojairi asked one evening, his calm voice cutting through Shigaraki's agitated scratching. There is a new player causing a stir. They are calling him the hero killer, Shigaraki scoffed. Some street-level wannabe. Who cares? If he gets in my way, I'll turn him to dust. He's just another NPC. But Izuku's head snapped up from his monitor. The hero killer, he repeated, his fingers already flying across his keyboard, pulling up police bulletins and underground forums. Name Stain. Real name Kaizomi Akaguro. Former vigilante, now a serial killer targeting pro-heroes. To date, 17 confirmed attacks. 4 heroes killed, the rest left with career-ending injuries. His targets are not random. He seems to be choosing them based on some kind of personal criteria. He brought up a grainy security camera photo on his main screen. It showed a man who looked like a nightmare given form. He was wrapped in rags and leather, festooned with blades, a long, tattered scarf obscuring the lower half of his face, which was devoid of a nose. His eyes burned with a fanatical intensity. Look at this, Izuku murmured, pointing at a list of Stain's victims. There's a pattern. He doesn't target heroes based on rank or power. He targets them based on their public perception. The heroes he kills are the ones with the most lucrative endorsement deals, the highest merchandise sales, the ones who spend more time on talk shows than on patrol. The ones he paralyzes but leaves alive, they're the lesser-known, hard-working heroes. He's not just a killer. He's a missionary. He has an ideology, Shigaraki sneered. Ideology? He sounds like a preachy, self-righteous pain. I hate him. His character design is over the top, and his motivation is lame. Don't you see? Izuku said, turning in his chair, his eyes alight with a startling, brilliant intensity. He's not a rival, Tamura. He's a tool. A massive, world-changing tool that has just fallen into our lap. A tool for what? Shigaraki grumbled. He's killing heroes. That's our job. No, Izuku corrected, standing up and beginning to pace. The energy in the room shifted. This was the same energy he'd had when he first proposed the Aegis heist, the same cold fire he possessed when planning the USJ attack. Our job is to destroy hero society. You think that's done by killing heroes? It's not. Killing a hero makes them a martyr. It creates a symbol of sacrifice that the public can rally around. It reinforces the very system we're trying to break. He gestured to the image of Stain. But he isn't just killing them. He's judging them. He's articulating a critique that resonates with the quiet dissatisfaction of the populace. People are already grumbling about commercialized heroes. They see the ads, the merchandise, the celebrity worship. They feel, deep down, that something is wrong with the system. Stain is simply giving that feeling a voice. A bloody, terrifying, but undeniably charismatic voice. He is doing for us what we could not do ourselves, Izuku continued, his words coming faster. The USJ attack created fear. It made people feel unsafe. But Stain is creating doubt. He is forcing people to ask a question they never dared to ask before. What does it truly mean to be a hero? He is poisoning the well from which the entire hero system drinks. And the public, terrified and disillusioned after our attack, is thirsty for an alternative. Shigaraki stared at him, his single eye narrowed. So what's your brilliant plan? We send him a membership invitation? Ask him to join our party? The sarcasm was thick. No, Izuku said, a cunning smile touching his lips. We will never meet him. We will never ally with him. An official alliance would taint his message, make him look like just another villain. He must remain a pure, ideological force. We are not going to work with Stain. We are going to co-opt him. We are going to absorb his ideology, amplify his message, and ride the wave of his chaos all the way to shore. The plan that Izuku laid out over the next hour was not one of physical confrontation, but of mimetic warfare. It was subtle, insidious, and utterly brilliant. First, he began, pulling up a map of Hosa City. We create the perfect stage for him. Hosa is currently a hotbed of activity. Endeavor's agency is based there, and with All Might's recent exposure, Endeavor is more aggressive than ever, trying to close the gap and claim the #1 spot. The media is swarming the city, hoping for a quote from the flame hero. The tension is a powder keg. We will light the match. But not by attacking heroes directly. We will do something much simpler. We will release the Nomu. Shigaraki's head snapped up. The Nomu? We have more of them? Sensei's doctor has been busy, Izuku said with a shrug. We have 3 new specimens, lower grade than the one from the USJ, lacking the high-end shock absorption, but they are still immensely powerful and, more importantly, utterly mindless. They are pure, unthinking destruction. He pointed to 3 different locations on the Hosa map. We will release them simultaneously in the city's commercial district. They will be given one simple directive: cause as much damage as possible. The resulting chaos will draw every pro-hero in the city to one location. It will be an all-hands-on-deck emergency, and while the so-called true heroes are busy fighting our monsters, Izuku said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, the rest of the city will be effectively unguarded. The back alleys, the side streets, they will become Stain's personal hunting ground. We are not telling him where to go. We are simply creating a perfect environment for his work, like a biologist creating the ideal petri dish for a deadly bacteria to flourish. Shigaraki was beginning to understand. This wasn't a head-on assault. It was a feint. A grand, city-wide distraction. So while the pros are busy, Stain goes on a killing spree. I like it. More dead heroes. More dead heroes is a side benefit, Izuku corrected gently. The true objective is the narrative. While the Nomu are rampaging, I will be leaking information. I have a list of 12 independent journalists and online bloggers who are critical of the Hero Public Safety Commission. They will receive an anonymous tip. The League of Villains is in Hosu. The media will swarm, but they'll be focused on the Nomu. They'll film the fire, the destruction, the heroes fighting our monsters. And then, Izuku's eyes gleamed, after Stain has done his work, a second anonymous tip will be sent. The location of his latest victim. A hero he has judged and executed while the real heroes were busy fighting monsters. The media will find the body. And they will find Stain's message, his manifesto, which he always leaves at the scene. The story will write itself. He began to pace again, acting out the headlines. While Hosa burned, the hero killer passed judgment. League of Villains attack provides cover for Stain's crusade. Are heroes too busy fighting monsters to stop murders? We create a public relations nightmare. We inextricably link the chaos of the League of Villains with the ideology of the hero killer. We become 2 sides of the same coin. He is the question, and we are the answer. He exposes the sickness of hero society, and we present ourselves as the only cure. But Izuku wasn't finished. There was a second, even more insidious layer to his plan. This chaos is not just a stage for Stain, he said. It's also a recruitment drive. The underworld is full of powerful, disillusioned individuals who are drawn to chaos and ideology like moths to a flame. People who find Shigaraki's desire for simple destruction too childish, but who find Stain's philosophy compelling. We will use the Hosu incident as a beacon. He pulled up 2 files on his computer. The first was a police profile of a young woman with blonde hair and a disturbing history of violent incidents, always involving blood. Her name was Toga Himiko. The second was a shadowy, burnt figure, a phantom known only by the name Dabi, linked to a series of mysterious arson cases and rumored to be a powerful fire user. Individuals like these, Izuku explained, are currently unaligned. They are drawn to Stain's message, but he's a lone wolf. He doesn't recruit. But the League of Villains, the group that seemingly shares his goals, the group that can create the kind of chaos he thrives in, they might find us very, very interesting. We are not just creating a story for the public. We are creating an advertisement for the disenfranchised and the powerful. We are telling them, if you believe in Stain's vision, if you want to burn this world down, the League is where you belong. Shigaraki stared at the plan unfolding before him. It was a web of such complexity and psychological manipulation that it made his own desire to smash things feel brutish and simple. Izuku wasn't planning a battle. He was orchestrating a cultural shift. He was weaponizing a narrative. So we do nothing? Shigaraki finally asked, the question laced with his inherent need for action. We just drop the Nomu and watch. We are the producers of the play, Tamura, Izuku said with a chilling calm. We set the stage, turn on the lights, and then let the actors perform. Our work is done before the curtain ever rises. And when the show is over, we will be the ones who reap the rewards. The night of the attack, the bar was once again a command center. But this time, it was quieter, more tense. There were no comms channels to monitor, no field agents to direct. There was only the waiting. Shigaraki sat hunched over the bar, idly scratching at a scar, his impatience a vibrating, palpable force. Izuku sat before his wall of monitors, his face illuminated by the cold blue light of a dozen different news feeds. At precisely 10:17 p.m., Kurojiri, who had been dispatched to Hosu, sent a single, coded text message to Izuku's phone, packages delivered. Izuku typed a few commands into his laptop, sending the encrypted tip to his list of media contacts. Then he leaned back and watched. It began slowly. A single, shaky live stream from a civilian's phone, showing a hulking, monstrous creature tearing a car in half. Then another feed, from the other side of the city, showing a different Nomu smashing through the front of a department store. Within minutes, the official news channels caught on. Helicopters were scrambled. The feeds became a chaotic mosaic of fire, destruction, and screaming. The heroes are responding, Izuku noted, tracking their movements via publicly available traffic cameras and police scanner chatter. Endeavor is on site. Dozens of sidekicks. They're converging on the commercial district, just as predicted. The battle was spectacular. Endeavor's flames lit up the night sky. Heroes swarmed the mindless Nomu, which thrashed and destroyed with single-minded purpose. It was exactly the kind of flashy, destructive battle that the media loved. It was the perfect distraction. While the city's heroes were engaged in their grand, televised struggle, Izuku's real work began. He opened a different program, a piece of software that monitored dark web forums and encrypted chat rooms, the digital back alleys where the underworld gathered. He was hunting. He found the first whispers an hour into the chaos. Talk of another hero attack. Not in the main district, but in a quiet alleyway a dozen blocks away. The victim was the pro-hero Native. Izuku cross-referenced the name with his database. Native was a C-lister, known more for his culturally insensitive costume than for any actual heroic deeds. A perfect target for Stain. He waited. He needed confirmation. He needed Stain to be gone before he made his move. He watched the police scanners, waiting for the inevitable call. It came 40 minutes later. A civilian reporting a body in an alley. With cold, precise movements, Izuku typed out the second anonymous tip, this time with an exact address, and sent it to a mainstream, high-profile news network. The effect was instantaneous. A field reporter, covering the Nomu attack, was diverted. The live broadcast cut from the fiery spectacle of Endeavor battling a monster to a shaky camera running down a dark, narrow alley. We are getting reports of another incident," the reporter said, her voice breathless. "Away from the main fight, oh God." The camera panned over the scene. The hero native was on the ground, alive but paralyzed, bleeding from a dozen cuts. Another hero, Ingenium, Tensei Ida, was sprawled nearby, his armor shredded, his body broken and unmoving. He had clearly tried to intervene and had paid the price. On the wall behind them, scrawled in blood, were two words: "False hero." The narrative Izuku had predicted clicked into place with the force of a slammed door. The reporter's voice was trembling as she connected the dots for the entire world to see. It appears to be the work of the hero killer, Stain," she stammered. While the city's heroes were engaged in a desperate battle with the League of Villains monsters, it seems the hero killer used the chaos to continue his horrific crusade. Shigaraki let out a low, guttural laugh. "It worked. You magnificent bastard, it actually worked." But Izuku wasn't watching the news anymore. He was watching his other monitors. The forums and chat rooms he was monitoring had exploded into a frenzy. The name Stain was everywhere, but so was the name League of Villains. They were being discussed in the same breath, as two facets of the same terrifying new reality. And then, he got the hit he was waiting for. A private, encrypted message request. The user ID was anonymous, but the message was direct. User _7G3D4B, you create chaos. The hero killer purifies. I'm interested in the chaos. Where do I sign up? Izuku cross-referenced the message's digital signature. It bounced through half a dozen proxy servers, but its origin point was a burner phone in the Kansai region, an area recently plagued by a string of arsons where the victims were all revealed to be corrupt officials or white-collar criminals. The profile fit. He typed back a single word, Deku, wait. A second message request popped up, this one from a different user, decorated with cute, bloody emojis. Cutie to the core, Stain Senpai is so cool. He makes everyone all bloody and broken. You guys made the big flashy party so he could play. I wanna play too. Let's be friends. The message was accompanied by a low-resolution selfie. A blonde girl with her hair in two messy buns, her face splattered with something dark. Toga, Himiko. Izuku felt a chill run down his spine, but it was the chill of success. They were coming. The freaks, the monsters, the true believers. They had seen the beacon. He looked over at Shigaraki, who was now watching the news with rapt attention as analysts debated the devastating implications of the night's events. Shigaraki was happy because heroes had been hurt. He was enjoying the spectacle. Izuku was looking at something else entirely. He was watching the birth of a movement. The USJ attack had made the League infamous, but the Hosa incident, this carefully orchestrated piece of ideological theater, had made them something far more dangerous. It had made them relevant. It had given their chaos a purpose, a philosophy, even if it was one they had stolen. They were no longer just a league of villains. They were becoming a symbol. A dark mirror to the very hero society they sought to destroy. Stain was the spark, and Izuku had just used him to start a wildfire, and in the shadows, the arsonists were gathering, eager to help him burn it all down.